Here's a look at some disturbing art that pierces straight into your soul. If you were to cross the unorthodox style of Picasso with someone pulled straight off the set of The Walking Dead, it's likely this portrait would be the result. Although it's clear this portrait is heavily stylized, there's no denying the fact that its raw and visceral appearance makes it almost impossible to look at without feeling a certain level of discomfort. While several elements of this piece are in fierce competition for your attention, perhaps the most notable characteristic is the intense gaze from this being's offset pair of bewildered eyes. Moving down the face, we're greeted by a nose with flared nostrils so large they almost act as a second pair of pupils staring back at you from the soulless abyss. Lastly, what better way to be greeted by a haunting apparition than with a grin housing a mouthful of tiny, pebble-like teeth? All these ghastly details are contained within an oblong head, reminiscent of a bean grotesquely colored with choppy, muddied brushstrokes as if the subject truly is a zombie with visibly decaying flesh. Signed in the corners of this piece with bright red paint, we see the name Barrio Quinto, accompanied by the number 2012. Andres Barrio Quinto is the name of this Filipino artist, and as distinct as this piece may be, he never gave it a proper name. As the date suggests, this piece was painted in 2012 as a part of Barrio Quinto's Black Days series, which includes several other similar-looking works. While he appears to have several Instagram pages, all of which are privated, his extensive portfolio can be viewed on other sites, such as Facebook and ArtNet. And my goodness, I wasn't sure if we were still looking at the same artist anymore. I was blown away to find out Barrio Quinto is able to bounce back and forth between such drastically different painting styles. I would love to know if there's a certain reason behind it, such as deliberate experimentation with color and technique, or perhaps it's as simple as his brain finding therapeutic bliss in escaping the intricate and embracing childlike handiwork every once in a while. This next subject appears to be dressed in a suit, but the rest of this painting is anything but formal. We're immediately drawn to the figure's eerily illuminated orange face, emerging from the muted background like a flickering light bulb in a cold, dark basement. Their unnaturally red, machine-like eyes sit just off center of making direct eye contact, but their presence is still enough to give you goosebumps. Between them rests the bridge of the nose, its shadowy form creating the highest point of contrast in this piece. Finally, at the base of the chin, we see the subject's bulbous black lips, the strange illuminated quality on display once again as a result of the reflected light of a camera flash. These slightly pursed lips reveal the indication of teeth, separated by two streaks of burgundy paint, as if the subject is trying their best to give the viewer an uncomfortable smile. This painting, possibly a second untitled piece, comes to us this time from artist Davey Sandy, aka The Dread. Interviewed by Lois Stofsky on artbreakout.com, Davey Sandy appears to have minimal biographical information online aside from this article, which is unfortunate, especially when you read the first sentence stating Sandy was born blind on the island of Tobago. I mean, that's a pretty big statement, especially in regards to someone whose occupation relies heavily on sight. But surprisingly, there's no further mention of the magnitude of his blindness, the role it's played in his life, or in the creation of his art. Also, he's apparently a skateboarder, so if he really is blind, I'm truly amazed at what the Dread has been able to accomplish in his life in spite of his impairment. But without further information to go off of, I suppose we'll never know the full scope of his artistic process. His Instagram account, The Last New Yorker, does contain photos of his art and everyday life, but with little to no description of any given post. However, a 2021 post does present us with a photo of the nameless painting in question, accompanied by the words, "Flowers from Central Park," so perhaps we should consider this its title. You may have heard of a pineapple under the sea, but what about the one lurking in the dark, menacingly? The bizarre nature of this piece makes me truly at a loss for envisioning the type of mood its creator wanted to convey. We can see the clear distinctions of a human figure, as this is likely just another portrait. However, the abstraction of the lighting, their eyes, and most notably their hair, makes us question if this figure is more deeply rooted in reality or fiction. The way the right side of the subject's body appears to be bathed in a warm yellow glow makes me imagine they've been hiding in a dark, empty room, slowly emerging from the shadows towards their victim, the light from a lone window revealing their silhouette. While there's lots of layers and depth in the colors used throughout this piece, primarily in the subject's sunset-rich skin, the eyes have a jarringly cartoonish rendering to them, making this already unsettling piece all the more unnatural. Finally, the most peculiar element of this painting, even more so than the eyes, is the plant-like object protruding from the subject's head. Is it a stylized hairdo? Perhaps it's actual vegetation used symbolically or as a metaphor? Whatever the intention, this person could certainly pass as a horror character. After all, there's a pinhead, so why not a pineapple head too? This 22-year-old painting comes to us from Chinese painter Fei Yang. Admittedly, with a name like Fei Yang, it's a bit challenging to pinpoint any other sites from across the internet that feature this artist. So just like Davy Sandy, we have very limited information to go off of. But similar to Barrio Quinto, Yang appears to be a multi-talented artist, capable of several different styles on full display in his profile on artmajor.com, especially with his series of oil portraits, as we go from a sort of refined impressionism to a flatter-looking minimalist or cartoonish style. His upload of the piece we've deemed as Pineapple Head helps to partially solve the mystery, as we can see he's titled the piece Self-Portrait 2, meaning this isn't a character derived from fiction, but a representation of Yang himself. However, what's still unclear is if the green vegetation on his head is derived from fiction, or possibly a poorly dated hairstyle Yang tried in 2003. But based on the painting's very limited description, a mysterious journey towards nature, this could suggest the portrait is a hybrid of man and nature. Conceptually, this last piece may appear to be the most straightforward, but possesses arguably the most soul-piercing eyes of all the portraits featured. Like moths to an open flame, we're immediately captivated by the subject's fiery crimson complexion, but not before directing our attention to the blue irises surrounded by a sea of pure white, creating undeniably the most intense point of contrast we've seen out of all the paintings. And with high contrast comes high discomfort. As for the composition, this fedora-wearing, highly disturbed-looking individual, pitted against a dull and dreary cityscape, appears as though he's the one on the receiving end of an eerie sight, when in reality, it's us who should feel uneasy. This soul-piercing portrait links to panhandlermagazine.com, with a featurette on its creator, Scott Cowgill. Following the theme of untitled portraits, Cowgill joins the other artists mentioned, as he too seems to forego naming each and every one of his paintings, as this piece is shown amongst 13 other untitled pieces from his portfolio on Panhandler magazine. In the group that accompany his article, many of the similar aesthetics to our piece in focus can be found, such as the dreary colors, cityscape backdrops, and even an almost identical looking character, albeit severely less jarring. Although his online presence may be limited, Cowgill does have an Instagram where many more of his pieces can be viewed. Additionally, this hat-sporting character makes quite a lot of appearances in slightly altered ways, and seems to be a sort of mascot for Cowgill. It's still unclear who exactly this is trying to portray, as throughout all their appearances, they're simply marked as untitled, or accompanied by the phrase, "New Day Rising, Make It Count," and even on apparel, where it's referred to as familiar face. But ultimately, I wouldn't rule out the possibility this could very well be a self-portrait or caricature Cowgill created of himself. Eyes are important. They're the windows into the soul, as the saying goes. So perhaps we can learn a lot from looking deep into the eyes of an artistic portrait, as in its reflection, we find we have a lot to learn about others, and more importantly, ourselves.